The morning had started like any other, quiet and slow with the smell of fresh coffee drifting through my kitchen, until the thud of something heavy hit the front gate. Curious, I stepped outside and found a crisp white envelope lying in the dew-soaked grass. My name was printed in bold letters across the front, the kind of formal typeface that instantly tightened the back of my neck. Inside was a thick stack of papers stamped with county seals, all full of legal jargon. As I skimmed, one phrase jumped out. Notice of violation and pending litigation. My eyebrows shot up. I wasn't part of any homeowners association. At least, I didn't think I was. I read on, confusion turning to disbelief. The document accused me of failing to keep my lawn to community standards, of not painting my shutters an approved color, and of ignoring multiple fines I had supposedly racked up. It even threatened a lien on my property. My first thought was that this had to be a mistake. Maybe they mixed me up with someone else on my street. But the address was mine, no question about it. I grabbed my laptop and checked the county property records, just to be sure I hadn't somehow missed a memo when I bought the place. Nothing. No mention of any HOA attached to my parcel, not a single clause in the deed. Yet the letter demanded hundreds in back fees and a court appearance. As I set the envelope down on the kitchen counter, a strange mix of irritation and curiosity settled in. Who would go to the trouble of suing a stranger for rules that didn't apply? One thing was certain. Whoever sent this wasn't just making a clerical error. Someone was determined to drag me into a fight I never signed up for. The next morning, I was still replaying the bizarre letter in my mind when I heard a sharp knock at the door. 3 quick raps like a gavel. Through the window I saw a woman marching up my driveway with the brisk, no-nonsense stride of someone who believed the world should move out of her way. She wore a wide-brimmed sun visor that practically announced authority, and her polo shirt bore an embroidered logo of the neighboring subdivision. Before I could even say hello, she planted herself at the base of my porch steps, hands on hips, eyes narrowed. "I'm Karen," she said flatly, her voice clipped and loud enough for the squirrels to hear. "President of the Lakeshore HOA. We need to discuss your outstanding violations." I blinked, still half convinced this was some sort of prank. "I don't live in Lakeshore," I replied. "This is Maple Ridge. Different neighborhood entirely." Karen gave a small, dismissive laugh, like I told a child's excuse. "Oh, that's what everyone says at first. But our updated boundary maps clearly include your property. You're responsible for dues and adherence to our bylaws." She waved a manila folder stuffed with paperwork as though that settled the matter. I stepped outside, keeping my tone even. "Ma'am, I checked the county records. My deed shows no HOA. You can't just claim my house." Her eyes narrowed further, a spark of triumph glinting. "Watch me. I've filed suit. Either pay the assessed fines and monthly fees, or we'll escalate." With that, she turned on her heel and strode back toward the sidewalk, leaving me standing there in stunned silence. The audacity was almost comical, but the lawsuit in my kitchen said she was serious. Whatever game she was playing, I had just been drafted without consent. Determined to understand how this woman thought she had any claim over my property, I spent the evening digging through every document I could find. First came the closing packet from when I bought the house, a thick folder of titles, deeds, and maps. Every page confirmed the same thing. No mention of Lakeshore HOA anywhere. Still unsatisfied, I logged onto the county's online records database and searched my parcel number. Up popped the original plat maps, zoning information, and any associations tied to the land. Again, nothing connected to Lakeshore. Just to be thorough, I pulled the neighboring subdivision's filings. Their map stopped 5 blocks short of my address. The only possible link was a decades-old survey line that once included an empty lot across the street, long since sold and redrawn. Somehow, Karen had latched onto that outdated scrap, and convinced herself it gave her power. The more I read, the more absurd it became. She'd attached screenshots of my house to the court filing, close-ups of my garden fence, the color of my shutters, even my recycling bins, claiming each item violated Lakeshore's aesthetic standards. It wasn't just overreach, it bordered on obsession. I called a neighbor who had lived here for 20 years. He chuckled knowingly. "Karen's been trying to expand the HOA for years," he said. "She thinks if she claims enough homes, She'll get a bigger budget and more control. You're just her latest target. Hearing that lit a fire in me. This wasn't a harmless mistake. It was a deliberate power grab. I began organizing every document, highlighting each line proving my independence. If she wanted a legal fight, I was ready to show a judge just how flimsy her claim really was. By the time midnight rolled around, I was buried in a sea of browser tabs and county statutes, determined to find something that would shut Karen down for good. That's when I stumbled across the state's nonprofit corporation database, where homeowners associations are required to file their annual reports and maintain a valid board of directors. Out of curiosity, I typed in Lakeshore HOA. A sparse page appeared with a few filings and a faint red warning icon. My pulse quickened as I read the note. Annual compliance documents, pending. Digging deeper, I discovered that their bylaws required every board member to sign off on yearly reports for the HOA to keep its legal status. One missing signature meant they were technically out of compliance and subject to dissolution. Scrolling through the uploaded PDFs, I spotted it immediately. This year's treasurer line was blank. The previous treasurer had apparently resigned mid-year, and no replacement had signed the forms. That meant, legally speaking, their authority was hanging by a thread. I cross-checked the state's regulations to be sure I wasn't misreading the rules. There it was in plain language. Failure to maintain current filings and unanimous signatures could render the association inactive, and any member of the public could petition for dissolution if they proved negligence. I sat back, the glow of the screen lighting my grin. Karen had marched up my driveway armed with threats and outdated maps, but her own organization had handed me the perfect counterstrike. All I needed was a simple petition and supporting documents to present to the county clerk. If the board didn't respond within the given time frame, the HOA could be legally dissolved. I wasn't just defending my property anymore. I was about to turn the tables entirely. The morning of the hearing dawned bright and uncomfortably cheerful, as if the universe had decided to add a little extra spotlight to the showdown. I arrived at the small county courthouse carrying a neatly organized binder filled with deeds, maps, and a copy of the state statute about HOA compliance. Karen was already there, stationed outside the courtroom door like a general preparing for battle. She wore a tailored blazer and clutched a thick folder crammed with color-coded tabs, clearly expecting a spectacle. Inside, the room was modest, just a few rows of benches, a single flag, and a judge who looked like he'd already seen too many petty disputes for one lifetime. Karen wasted no time launching into her argument. She produced glossy photographs of my home. My flower beds, my blue shutters, even a close-up of my driveway gravel. She rattled off supposed infractions in a rapid-fire voice, each accusation more absurd than the last. When it was my turn, I stood calmly and handed the judge certified copies of the official plat maps showing the boundary lines, along with the annual report from the Lakeshore HOA missing the treasurer's signature. I explained that not only was my property outside their jurisdiction, but their own filings placed them out of compliance with state law. The judge flipped through the documents, his brow lifting slightly at the missing signature. He looked over his glasses at Karen. "You have no legal standing to enforce anything on this homeowner," he said evenly. "Case dismissed." The gavel struck once, sharp, final, and shockingly quick. Barely 3 minutes had passed since I'd begun. Karen's face froze, the flush of victory draining away as she gathered her papers in silence. I walked out with the faintest nod, feeling the tide shift entirely in my favor. Walking out of the courthouse with the judge's dismissal still echoing in my ears, I felt a strange mix of relief and resolve. Karen might have lost her case, but I knew someone that persistent wouldn't simply walk away. I wanted a permanent solution, something that would make her threats impossible. That night, I spread my paperwork across the dining table and opened my laptop to the state's nonprofit corporation portal once more. There it was in black and white. The Lakeshore HOA's status still listed as pending, annual compliance required. According to the statutes I'd pored over, if an association failed to correct its filings within a certain window, anyone could file a petition for administrative dissolution. The process was shockingly straightforward. All I needed was proof of their lapse, a small fee, and a notarized statement. I spent the next few days gathering evidence. Screenshots of the incomplete filings, a certified copy of the unsigned annual report, and my own affidavit detailing the treasurer's resignation. When I visited the county clerk's office, the clerk barely raised an eyebrow as she stamped my petition. If no one contests it in 30 days, the HOA is dissolved, she said matter-of-factly. Meanwhile, word spread quietly among the Lakeshore residents. A few reached out to me, some curious, others openly supportive. Many were tired of Karen's constant fines and late-night rule enforcement. Not one seemed eager to help her fight the petition. By the end of the month, the state's database updated again. The red icon beside Lakeshore HOA now read inactive administrative dissolution. Just like that, the association Karen guarded so fiercely was gone. What began as a ridiculous lawsuit had flipped completely. And I hadn't just defended my property. I'd erased the very organization she used to bully the neighborhood. I was trimming the hedges one warm Saturday morning when the inevitable storm finally arrived. Karen came barreling down the sidewalk, visor tilted like a battle helmet, her face the color of a ripe tomato. She didn't bother with pleasantries, only a sharp finger pointed straight at me. "What did you do?" she shouted, her voice cracking enough to draw curtains back in nearby windows. I set down the clippers and wiped my hands on a rag, keeping my tone as even as possible. "If you're talking about the HOA, you might want to check the state registry," I said. "It's been dissolved." Her eyes widened in disbelief before narrowing to slits. "You can't just dissolve an entire homeowners association," she barked. "I built this community. You've ruined everything." Neighbors began drifting onto porches and driveways, their curiosity obvious. Someone quietly started recording with a phone. Karen's voice rose with each sentence, accusations tumbling out, claims about property values, neighborhood standards, and the chaos she swore would follow. I calmly explained the legal filings, the missing treasurer's signature, and the 30-day window that had passed without objection. "It wasn't me," I said with a small shrug. "It was the law." Her fury spiked. She stomped her foot like a frustrated child, demanding that residents band together to fight back. But instead of rallying to her side, people exchanged glances, and a few even smiled. A neighbor from across the street finally called out, "Karen, maybe it's time to let it go." That single comment seemed to puncture her defiance. She spun on her heel and stormed off, muttering under her breath, while the small crowd quietly dispersed. For the first time since this began, the power she wielded so confidently was gone, replaced by the unmistakable weight of irrelevance. Weeks passed, and the neighborhood began to feel like an entirely different place, lighter, freer, as if an invisible weight had been lifted from every porch and garden. Without Karen's endless notices and arbitrary fines, people started adding personal touches to their homes that had once been forbidden. Bright flower boxes appeared beneath windows. A family down the street painted their shutters a cheerful teal. Someone even set up a small lending library in a converted mailbox without worrying about approval from a committee. The feared collapse in property values never happened. In fact, a few real estate agents told me interest in the area actually ticked up, because potential buyers loved the absence of HOA restrictions. Neighbors who had barely exchanged nods before now lingered at the end of driveways to chat. We organized a weekend block party, something Karen had always vetoed for noise concerns. This time, there were no forms to sign, no official permits demanded. Music floated down the street as kids chased each other with chalk-stained hands. I grilled burgers while others set up tables of homemade desserts. Someone even brought a portable fire pit for marshmallows once the sun went down. Laughter rolled late into the evening, and for the first time, the neighborhood truly felt like a community, one built on choice and goodwill instead of rules and penalties. As I sat in a lawn chair watching the glow of string lights reflect in the happy faces around me, I couldn't help but think back to that first envelope slid under my gate. What began as an infuriating attempt to control me had ended in something unexpectedly positive. A neighborhood unbound by one person's obsession with power. Peace wasn't just restored, it was stronger than ever.